Hello everybody. Today we will study lesson 9, visual communication. Visual communication is a popular topic in human-computer interactions. It means the communication through a visual aid and is described as a conveyance of ideas and information in forms that can be read or looked upon. Visual communication in part or whole relies on visions and is primarily presented or expressed with two-dimensional images. The visions includes science, typography, drawings, graphic design, illustrations, industrial design, advertising, animation, color, and electronic resources. And in the scope of the lecture today, we will study some parts of the visual communication theory. The first thing which is very important is Gestalt laws, which defines how the human brains work, and it also provides a huge implication for web designers. Second, we learn about golden ratios and how the ratios is applied in various application domains. And in the end, we learn about the theories related to uh, using text, icon, and color. Okay, the first topic is about Gestalt laws. Gestalt is a psychology term which means unified whole. This refers to theories of visual perception developed by German psychologists in 1920th century. These theories attempt to describe how people tend to organize visual elements into groups or unified wholes when certain principles are applied. We can also refer to the slogan, "The whole is greater than the sum of its parts," to refer to the power of Gestalt laws. And there are six main principles within the Gestalt laws, namely foreground and background, proximity, similarity, symmetry, continuity, and closure. Because Gestalt principles describe the manner in which the brain interprets imaginary, they should be the cornerstone of every visual designer's educations. As we are working in both the technical and also the usability part of web development, hence Gestalt principles are very relevant to us. It determine which visual elements are most effective in any given situations. Gestalt has a wide applications in goal-oriented problem-solving, intuitive designs, user interface designs. Notice that this not only apply in web development, but also in a wide range of product development. And as said by one practitioners, great designers understand the powerful role that psychology plays in visual perception. What happens when someone's eye meets your design creations? How does their mind react to this message your piece is sharing? So we start with the first Gestalt law, foreground, background, or we also call it the figure ground law. This law examines how the eye can separate shapes in a design from the background of that design. Foreground is the area immediately in front of you that sets the stage for the main part of the landscape, and background is a part of the landscape that is the most distant from you. Or we could say the small objects are normally perceived as one lying in front of the bigger objects. A classic example uses a vase or candlestick illustration to show two faces peering at each other, as you can see in the screen. But you can also see this effect in a variety of logo designs. It works because human eyes want to see the figure of the foreground object and the background on the ground as two different planes of focus. With very simple techniques applied, we can push an item to the foreground or background by how it is positioned on the page relatively to other items. Balancing figure and ground can make the perceived image more clear. Everything that is not a figure is considered as a background, which can be used to create some interesting visual effects and tricks, particularly when the designer or artist introduce deliberate ambiguity. A favorite technique of the surrealist MC Escher has introduced. As you can see in the picture in the screen. So we see the transitions from the background to the foreground together with the appearance from fishes to birds. So we also talk a bit about the implication for web designers. So it's important that we as web designers are able to decide which elements are figures that demand instant attentions and which elements are ground and therefore just provide a context but are not too important. So good web designers will know that they have to make the users see the difference between the figures and the ground on any given web page, unless this has been done on purpose for some artistic websites. For starters, the smart use of color will help to set figures apart from the background, as in the thoughtful introduction of shading. In the image on the right-hand side, represent for the Nathan Frost website. Is one famous web designer in the community. This presents a complex array of graphics, textures, colors, and shapes on the background. This normally is not recommended, especially when you start to do with your first website. But in this case, it works. The reason is that certain treatments to the various elements, we are able to quickly define what constitutes contents or figures and what constitutes structures and the background. We see the second example as the picture in the left-hand side represent for the communication clearly of the levels of ground depth. There can even be varying levels of hierarchy in the ground elements. And this website is done by Chuck Schmallet, also a famous web designer. And on this main page, we can see that the levels of hierarchy via the use of a drop shadow. The white areas is on top, while the shaded areas is at a lower depth. This combined with the shading and the lower contrast helps to communicate its slightly diminished importance in the overall page hierarchy. The direct implications comes to also links, buttons, and overlays. How we can use that. As you see in the right-hand side, the example of two navigation menus. The one in the left is more effective, and the one in the right is less effective. The two navigation areas are identical in composition. Suppose we have like five different links. But the one in the left quickly perceived to be the text content figure, resting on almost inconsequential background shading. The one on the right is perceived as twice as many figures since the structure and the content are composed of lines. And in this case, lines are perceived to be content, so the structure competes with the contents. The result is ugly and distracting. And in the second example, as you see in the left-hand side, how is a good practice when design buttons. The button should look like that they can be clicked. And we see there's two buttons. Both of them are submit buttons, but the one on the left look as if it could be used another part of the page structures or background shading. And the button on the right graphically invites us and avoid pushing or clicking. Shading and highlights have made clear what part of this figure and what part is ground. And as you see in the screen, is another example of an ineffective and ugly web design. So this student tried to have interesting background pictures, and this results in using very clear background with a mix of text and figures. And he also used kind of similar things in the foreground elements. And the result is a very distracting and confusing website. So we see that the use of contrast is important to differentiate between the figure and the ground. And you see in the link where you can read more about the guideline of using colors to give the good contrast. Uh, uh, the contrast level can be different when we decide color for large text, incidental, or logo types. For example, according to this rule, the large-scale text and image of large-scale text should have a contrast ratio at least 3 to 1. And you can go to this link to check the ratio of contrast. And now, welcome to the second Gestalt law, the law of proximity. These laws said that items, elements are viewed as a group based on their proximity or distance to one another. And you see an examples in the screens. There are all nine, a group of nine squares. And on the right hand side, the nine squares are perceived as a big square or a window. While the nine squares in the left-hand side show just scattered visions. So items are grouped visually, creating less clutter and making a more organized layout. Items are unrelated to each other should be placed further apart to emphasize their lack of relationship. So for web designers, these also have a huge impact. The good points are for designers that they should come up with a strategy to organize the interface along natural ways the human brain absorbs and classifies data. So, for example, how to organize elements such as dips or sections, or forms, paragraphs, headings, and to express their relationships. How to organize a web layout to make it scannable and easily perceived by readers. For the law of proximity, the white space are very important because it gives the hints for relationship between the elements. The space without any content not only adds the air to general layout, but can also be used to organize its elements as groups and unite when is needed. As we show in the examples, this is not a website, but designed a business card, which can also appear on internet. So we see on the right hand side is more effective strategies of organizing informations, where the information about the streets, about locations are grouped together, and the information about the contacts are put together. So it's look better than the one on the left. With white space, the designers can harmonically separate the paragraphs in a big bulk of text to make it more digestible and visually pleasant for readers. And this approach is often applied in a website like blog articles, online newspapers, and big copy blogs on websites. In this case, the principle of proximity signals that the copy lines, which are closer to each other, present the unified ideas or piece of information, and in this way makes own the text structure. This also another example of how web design should be aware of the proximity. When we design a navigation menu, these also two options for designs long hierarchical navigational menu. The one on the left appear like very clear and more effective than the one on the right hand side, as we group the uh, elements, the links in the same category together and giving the space between different categories. Now you see another example in the screen. This comes from one of the delivery for the first exercise. The website is overall is very nicely designed, but for the navigation menu, the author put the script in the right hand side, which far away from the rest of the hyperlinks. And when we put the first links far away from the others, it make the human brain need take more time to scan through the links to understand this the first one. So the solution for this is instead of having the script on the right hand side, we should put it right after the us to make a, a consistent group of links. Web designers can arrange content blocks of their websites in a way which most naturally corresponds to natural human ability of visual perception. One more domain where proximity can have a positive impact on user experience is the organization of diverse content blocks in the layout, such as image, links, icons, controls, form elements, product cards, and other steps. The principles of proximities allows designers to arrange layouts, positions of these elements in a way that it mostly corresponds to the natural perceptions of a human. For example, look at the pictures in the screen. Is the screenshot of e-commerce mobile views, the website for jewelry store. The right screen shows the product card. We can see that the general data about the items, the item names, the color, the width, weight, materials, and other information is given in the same several lines. Now it's given in a table format. and in these ways, they are put close to each others and naturally perceived as a unique piece of content. And here's another example. We grounded heavily on the principles of proximity, how the authors give the very interesting layout for that online magazines. And we see in the pictures that all the content and control blocks are arranged on the basis of the broken grid and without any frames separating them from each others. So this is quite a creative ways and non-standard way of designing a landing page. The proximity of these elements allows users quickly define core content zones, including the set of links in the headers, the list of the latest publications on the left, the view of the preview for the fresh article, and the block of social network links in the footer. Moreover, inside the global block of the principal of proximities continues to separate and unify the elements. So the designers arranges the positions in the list of the latest publications around different topics, as well as separates the links to the web pages in the header from the controls of instant actions such as search or subscription. This approach not only makes the layout elegant and scannable, but also strengthens intuitive navigation for better usability. The third Gestalt law is about similarity among elements. The law says when elements look similar to one another, people often perceive them as a group or a pattern. This similarity can occur in the form of shape, colors, shading, or other qualities. For example, the figure illustrating the laws of similarity, as you see in the screen, portrays 36 circles all equal distance apart from one another and forming a square. In these depictions, 18 of them are shaded dark and the other 18 are shaded light. So we perceive the dark circles as a group and the light circles belongs to other group. And this makes six horizontal lines with the square of circles. This law is very useful to group elements together that belong to a certain category, hence very essential for designs of e-commerce or newspapers websites. As you see in the screen is how CNN website used this Gestalt law to present different topics within one news category. The site visitors can efficiently perceive the organization on this page. And when the readers does this, he is better able to use and to interact with the newspapers. And that can give, for example, e-commerce sites more conversions or newspapers sites more readers. And for example, when you look at the CNN size intimately, you can notice that all of the headlines that appear right below every pictures are also reference links that you can click on and go into the detailed content of the article. And this is also probably the most common way of organizing articles for online newspaper. Of course, many websites utilize different link colors and different link styles, but they all work toward one specific and common purpose. So instead of there being disunity and chaos or confusion in the links, there is actually great similarity or purpose and therefore function. We look at another example in the screen. This is a homepage of Fox News, also quite a popular newspaper in the US. As you can see, there's a lot of happenings on this busy homepage, and there are also a lot of hyperlinks in this page. The link color changes and the link styles are all just over the place, but they can do have a single and common purpose. So let's start from the top. The big headline at the top and center of the homepage is dark blue, bold, and in large fonts. This naturally means to be the eye-catcher elements of the page, which makes a world of sense. Then, when your eyes move down to the home page, you will notice a whole slew of smaller links. There are links to smaller headlines in the middle of the home page, as well as a variety of even smaller size links to videos and other news stories on different pages on the site. These smaller links are also lighter blue as opposed to the dark blue utilized for the headline font. Clearly, dark blue stands out more, which makes it ideal to catch the eye for headline reading. This all ties together in that the difference in link colors and link size come down to one thing. They are all in the service of telling the readers about the size categorical indications. Yes, to sum up, we see in the screen, bigger fonts is reserved for the most important headlines. Smaller fonts is meant for body copy, videos, and less important headlines. Dark blue indicates headlines, and lighter blue indicate links to stories. And in the opposite of similarity is abnormality. When similarity occurs, an object can be emphasized if it is dissimilar to the others. As you see in the logo in the screen, the highlight is given to the middle distorted square, and then this draw attention from the readers, and this is an important idea behind the logo design.